Meet Safety Chain, the #1 plant management platform that improves yield, maximizes productivity, and ensures compliance for process manufacturers. It's time to get paper off the shop floor and gain real-time visibility, control, and results across the enterprise. Trusted by over 1,500 facilities, Safety Chain is the only enterprise solution uniting production, quality, safety, and supplier management. Visit safetychain.com to learn more.
Welcome everyone to this session entitled Training Beyond the Classroom with your speakers Christy Grzywinski, Laura Nelson, Cassie Woods, and Chris Jones. Together, they will discuss how to create a culture where employees are inspired to learn by thinking and applying learned behaviors outside of the classroom. I'm Shamanique Schrick, an FSQA solution architect at Safety Chain Software, where I leverage my experience as an auditor and food safety professional to help companies align their business goals to Safety Chain's plant management platform. Utilizing a solution like ours helps to reinforce positive behaviors while keeping employees engaged outside of classroom trainings. If you have questions for our speakers, please put them in the comment section and use the question mark icon. And be sure to stick around for the post-session chat, where you'll be put into small groups so you can meet others and share perspectives on the session. Over to you, Christy, Laura, Cassie, and Chris.
All right. Thank you so much, Shamanique. It's so great to be here. Thank you all so much for joining us today. I'm excited to be here. Happy to see all of you. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Next slide for me, thanks. All right, so before I introduce our speakers and tell you a bit about what we're going to be talking about today, let me first introduce myself. As Shamanique said, my name is Christy Grzywinski, and I'm a technical director here at SQFI. I've been part of the SQFI technical team for 10 years as of this September, and I work to support SQFI's technical team in the execution of the SQF program. But most importantly, I'm responsible for our training programs, which is why I'm so excited about our session today. So, as Shamanique said, let me remind you to chat in any questions that you have while we go along. There's going to be a designated Q&A session at the very end. And we have Sherelle watching the chat over there. So pop your questions or comments into the chat box and we'll tackle them at the end there. Okay, all right, next slide. So when we look at the SQF code, which is based off of the GFSI benchmarking requirements, so this is required across all GFSI standards. I see my light is vibrating, so hopefully that's not hurting your eyes. We see that the creation of the site's culture of food safety is centered around training. For example, I have some language here from the SQF code requirement on food safety culture, and you see it mentions such things as employees are informed. So it doesn't say specifically training, right? But the employees need to understand their role in supporting the food safety plan and supporting the food safety culture as part of the food safety culture, as well as reinforcement of their learnings and their role in the whole scheme of food safety. So it says employees are positively encouraged and empowered. Next slide. By creating a culture of food safety isn't going to happen with a half-hour training program and a great snack machine in the break room. No foosball tables are going to inspire a great food safety culture where people do the right thing as far as food safety. But culture is all about people. People who are given the knowledge and the encouragement to do the right thing. So how are you going to create that culture needed to support the production of safe food? Next slide. Well, our speakers today are going to share with you how they were able to build a food safety culture using training tools that work both inside and outside the classroom. So learning isn't just an event, a finite moment in time, but rather a process integrated into what is done every day in their roles. So first up, we're going to have Laura Nelson, Vice President, Food Safety and Global Alliances at Intertech Alchemy, who is going to start us off by sharing outcomes from their annual training survey. And she's going to share with us why employees are not exhibiting those expected food safety behaviors, despite what we do, what we tell them to do, and demonstrate what to do in the classroom. And knowing why employees don't do what they're supposed to do is going to help us understand what is needed to drive compliant behaviors. So behaviors that will ultimately help all employees carry out those corporate goals, and behaviors that will build that food safety culture and ensure that you have that environment that allows for food safety to happen easily. And then Chris Jones, Senior Learning Systems Analyst, is going to share with us the process ConAgra brands use to identify and deliver beyond the classroom those skills their employees need to be successful in their jobs. You're going to enjoy his presentation. And then finally, we have Miss Cassandra Woods, former corporate training coordinator with BHJ USA LLC. She's going to tell us how her organization, she has a fabulous background, and I know she's going to kind of allude to it, but she knows her stuff as a learning person as well. She's going to show us how her organization identified missing skills among their employees that impacted their food safety plan and their food safety culture. So things were not going as to plan, and she used her wonderful background to upskill and reskill their management employees to align all their employees toward company goals. So before I hand it over to Laura, I have a poll for you. So we'll pull that poll up and indicate how your site builds employee leadership skills. So how does your site right now build employee leadership skills? Choose what works best for you, maybe a combination of things, but choose whatever works best. Several methods. Do you use several methods? Leadership training, formal leadership training? Do you use coaching on the floor or off the floor? Mentoring or monitoring? Mentoring, how do you do that? Discussions or e-learning? Choose what works best, and then we'll post those results up on the screen. All right, looks like you guys are tapping into that poll, and then we'll show you how that all goes. Okay, fantastic. E-learning. How many of you use e-learning? It seems like a second nature right now for us to use e-learning as part of our training. So it looks like a few of you are using e-learning. A lot of you use multiple methods, right? Yeah, I think to be successful, you do have to kind of tap into all those methods, but the front runners are formal leadership training, coaching. Great. I always like to see coaching being used. And that can take many forms, and our speakers are going to talk a bit about that. Mentoring, that's fantastic. E-learning, discussions. I think discussions kind of, might be among groups. All right. Fantastic. This is great. Glad to see you guys weighing in on what you use. Okay. Okay, great insight. And this is going to be a great segue into what our speakers talk about. Okay, with that, thank you so much for weighing in. And now let's hear from our first speaker, Miss Laura Nelson, Vice President at Intertech Alchemy. All right, take it away, Laura.
Thanks, Christy. Gosh, that's music to my ears on that poll. I'm loving all of these different methods. I mean, clearly way beyond the classroom. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And I should have known that this SQF group would have all these innovators in their learning and management teams, because that's what really we're talking about today. I'd like to start by just sharing and giving the industry kind of an attaboy. As an industry, we spend an enormous amount of time and resources training our employees on our food safety management expectations. It is, uh, you talk about developing the training, you talk about delivery of that training, maintaining those all important training records and organizing all of that. And then, probably the most expensive part of that is carving out that employee time to get that training done. Um, that's a big commitment. The question we need to ask ourselves is that investment working? Are we getting our money's worth? Is it achieving the results we want? During our recent Global Food Safety Training Survey, we asked the question to 1,300 uh, global food safety professionals to respond to the question. Despite all our efforts, we still have employees not following our food safety programs on the floor. We've done all this classroom training. We've just poured all this knowledge in, um, and yet we still have people not doing the right. Overwhelming 67% of the respondents said yes, unfortunately, we still have those rogue employees still not following our food safety programs, which of course introduces some level of risk in our organizations. And the question we have to ask ourselves is why? Next slide. By the way, this is the sixth year in a row that we had almost exactly the same results. We have the majority of the respondents are saying, yeah, we're putting all this work and all this effort in this training, and it's not delivering on those behaviors that we need for our food safety. Next slide. So why? Why is this happening? So we asked the question in our global survey. We said, why are those employees not exhibiting the expected behaviors? Number one answer, bad habits. Our employees have bad habits, and they just revert back to those, right? Um, Prefer doing things the old way. They're going to take the shortcuts, or they're going to go back to what they're more comfortable in, and and that's a problem. And then following another employee's direction. And here's the real insight here is a lot of data supports that 70% of our training occurs not in the classroom, but on that plant floor, where you get all of these influencers and these peers saying, hey, we're in a hurry, so you don't have to do that particular step. We can catch up on that later, right? And you get these influencers that really aren't correct, and that starts to skew those behaviors, and all of a sudden that becomes the norm. So, so we ask ourselves, well, so we have employees not following the right behaviors. What can we do? How are we assessing the success of our programs, the success of our training? And the respondents on our global survey, 70%, overwhelming, are using those quizzes in the classroom. So we've trained the employees, and now we're going to ask questions. Well, um, that's the moment in time, but are they taking that knowledge and transferring it into consistent behaviors? And I think the data says not consistently. Um, over 50% said we're going to use just attendance. So if they showed up at the training, probably got some nods. Yeah, we're here. We're understanding. That's an assessment of our training. And of course, that doesn't really connect us to, do they really comprehend the information that we're giving them? And um, and let's keep in mind, we've got multiple languages understood out there. We have culture differences out there, different education levels. There's all kinds of reasons why an employee may not fully understand the information we're given. And so if we don't have some mechanism to double check that, um, we're going to have non-compliant behaviors. And then that last is that behavior evaluation. And these are the unsung heroes. These are the innovators that we have because they understand the criticality of connecting the training and the knowledge to the doing. Do we have the knowing and the doing happening on that plant floor? And so behavior evaluation is starting to increase, and I think it's a great way. And I think Christy, you mentioned food safety culture, and of course connecting those behaviors is really all about culture, and do we have the right behaviors available? Next slide. So at Alchemy, we've very curious about trying to optimize this learning and getting the right results, right? Those behaviors is really what we're after. And so we commissioned a third-party research study to be done, and there was a subset of plants that were identified, different processing, some high, some large, some small, uh, very random selection. And the researchers went in there and did a baseline on their level of food safety understanding, and then tallied that up. Now, these are plants that had food safety training for years and years. So we're going in and looking at, do you understand the behaviors that are expected of you? 68% said, yes, we do. So definitely room for improvement. So the researchers went in with some very specific training on those behaviors, classroom training, and then retested those folks. Brought that score up to 82%. Now, understand the behaviors that are expected of them. Still a shortfall, right? And this was an average across those plants. Then we introduced a observation by those supervisors. So these supervisors were given a sheet that had observations to go out on the plant floor, observe those employees, looking for those exact behaviors that we're looking for, provide that feedback mechanism one-on-one, and then after 3 of those sessions, those observation sessions, they went back and retested for knowledge of the expected behaviors. On average, big increase, 94%. And in some plants, it was all the way up to 98%. Absolutely, easily can confirm that behaviors and validating those behaviors and having that reinforcement by those supervisors is absolutely critical. Another thing I can share with you just anecdotally is way after the study had stopped, and the supervisors were maybe going in less often, what they started seeing is the employees themselves, when a new employee came and joined somebody on the line, those existing employees were saying, whoa, you're doing it wrong, right? You need to do it this way because we're going to be assessed at some point. So now you have that peer-to-peer validations of behaviors, and that's really, really what we're all after. Next slide. The natural coaches in our organizations are our supervisors. And we ask a question of our respondents, and of course they agree that supervisors are critical, have a critical role in the food safety management programs. And we know that. They're the ones that cascade the food safety expectations from management all the way down to making sure those behaviors are there. And yet, we have to ask ourselves, what are we doing to arm those all important supervisors and giving them the skills that they need to have those critical conversations? I mean, let's face it, we're asking those busy supervisors to um, uh, to go into one of those employees that are exhibiting that bad habit, incorrect behaviors. They used to be a coworker 2 weeks ago. Now they have to discipline that person and course correct that person. That's a difficult conversation. And um, in reality, we promote supervisors because they're the most senior person. They show up at work on time. They know the process and the equipment, not necessarily because they have the leadership skills. And it's interesting. We we actually at Alchemy, in our quest for always looking for what the industry needs to optimize their operations, we asked them, do you need business skills? Do we need some training on business skills, or should we have technical skills? Maybe a library on technical skills, or soft skills, those leadership skills. And frankly, we were super surprised because the overwhelming response was, Laura, we absolutely need the soft skills. We can train them on technical, we can train them on business. It's the soft skills that we are struggling with. And so clearly that gap exists. And we've had some great feedback with people that are focused on upskilling and skilling in leadership uh, around improving the multiple levels within the organization, but for sure, and certainly there are supervisors, and giving them those skills to have those change management, difficult conversations, conflict resolution, effective communications that they need to do their job and do it well. So we're going to hear more about that from our next two speakers on how they've tackled this in their organization and really put some innovative programs together. So with that, I'm going to turn our program over to Chris. Chris, let us know what you've been doing over there in ConAgra.
Well, thank you, Laura. Let's go ahead to the next slide. Take that one off. We'll get right into the presentation here. So thank you, everyone. Appreciate your attendance. I've been invited to share a little bit about ConAgra Brand's experience with employee training and provide an overview of the training process that we use within our teams to go beyond the classroom and identify and deliver the skills our employees need to be successful in their job roles. To ensure that each associate knows and understands the importance of food safety requirements as it relates to their work, and most importantly, adherence to following those requirements by practicing proper GMPs, sanitation practices, and awareness of food safety hazards that might be present, and actions what to take when they occur. Let's go ahead to the next slide. So I'm going to give you a brief overview about ConAgra's training process pillar that we employ at our production facilities, called the Continuous Skill Development, or CSD pillar. CSD is one of several functional pillar teams within our zero loss system, whose goal is to identify and eliminate losses within our processes. Our aim with the CSD is to focus on those losses that may be caused by human factors like skill loss, process failure, improper or incomplete training. Our pillar's mission is delivering a culture where expectations are clear, the path to attain new skills is defined, and metrics are in place to continuously identify development opportunities for our team members. Let's go to the next slide. So I'm sharing this slide because during my career in the different facets of the food industry, I've experienced what's being described in both of these columns, comparing the maturity and with it the effectiveness of employee training programs. The column on the left describes traits of maybe a bare bones training program. Maybe it's not even a formal program at all. It's a process that's been in place since the doors opened at your facility. That's the way we've always done it approach, where a new employee arrives. They may get a brief lecture on hand washing and what day of the week to expect their paycheck. And then it's off to the production floor to get stuck with good old Sam for the next several hours while he shows your new hire how to keep the cartons feeding the machine. On the right, we see what we could be. Where plant food safety and job specific skills aren't just a check the box once and done, but an ongoing investment in each associate's development. Good old Sam and his tribal knowledge as a buddy is supplemented with a blend of classroom type training and on the job mentoring with step up cards along the way to check for understanding. Even Sam's development from a buddy to an effective mentor receives focus to ensure that effective communication and adherence to that training curriculum. Our training curricula, along with our playbooks, one-point lessons, and other materials aren't just, sitting on a bookshelf collecting dust somewhere, but they're reviewed frequently, updated to address the latest losses and regulatory requirements. Most importantly, the various departments from around the plant recognize that Employee skill development is an absolute necessity in continuous improvement culture, and we work together to identify and address those losses. We conduct audits of employee work behaviors, and they share their talents and expertise in employee training. Next slide. So the continuous skill development training management system follows 4 general steps: planning, training, validation, and review. This is similar to the continuous improvement cycle or CAP-DO that you're probably already familiar with. The process is continually undergoing assessment, refinement to continually improve outcomes and eliminate losses. Next slide. The first step, planning, is probably the most important and at least initially the most resource intensive. Go to the next slide, please. So as far as the individual categories within this planning step, you can see it's all focused around the preparation of the system for your learners, to define the path for your employees to follow to develop their job skills. 5 objectives of this planning step include process mapping, creating skills inventories, developing planning, training curricula, training and qualifying your deployment team, and then setting meaningful goals for your pillar. Let's go to the next slide. If you're unfamiliar with the CSD process mapping, it's probably very similar to your organization's HACCP flowcharts. The process mapping not only helps us understand how to break up the work into individual job functions, but it also helps establish metrics on how many employees will need to be trained in each role. In this example, we're mapping the roles within our batching process. Next slide. The remainder of the planning step involves identifying subject matter experts, or refer to them as SMEs, to helping create the skill inventories, the training materials themselves, and the on-the-job training activities that will be set within our training curriculum. This is also where we're looking at for the right people from the organization, hopefully volunteers to serve as trainers for classroom type training, mentors for the hands-on OJT, and validators, which we'll get to in a moment. And that brings us to our next step, the CSD process. Next slide. Training. This is where your planning and preparation from the first step are being applied for your new hires or transfer employees. Next slide. In our CSD training process, we'll utilize our team members for our learning content that we've created to perform a training with our new employees. We're presenting the food safety and safety and process playbooks in a quiet classroom setting, along with a few other courses specific to the job role, and then have our designated job mentors guide the on-the-job portions of the learning. Now, keep in mind, OJT portions of the training isn't just sticking your employee with whichever operator is running the machine that day. The designated mentors have themselves been trained for their role and have undergone those soft skills trainings to be effective in their mentorship role. Your CSD team may not all necessarily be considered subject matter experts, but they do need to be trained for their role in the team, understand how to follow the agenda, use the training materials, and most importantly, know what good looks like for the job that they're instructed. Next slide. Let's compare the CSD mentors to the classic buddy system. The buddy system you may be familiar with. There's the criteria is just basically pairing someone up for who also does that job. They may share random practices. They're often inconsistent. They may rely on memory or habit, and depending on what day of the week it is, they'll be situated on what events are going on that day, versus having something standardized and an identified process. I've seen buddy systems where someone actually signed up for that buddy role because they see it as a chance for the new guy to take over on their machine while they can take longer breaks. In a mentor system, trained subject matter experts using standard training materials deliver consistent training and reinforcement. They'll cover all the skill elements identified from our planning step. Initially, when a new employee begins the OJT portion of their training, they'll mainly be observing their mentor performing the work while they demonstrate the processes and point out all the different steps involved. Gradually, those roles become reversed and the trainee gets more practice. They're the ones demonstrating to their mentors their abilities to perform those jobs. One of the traits we try to instill in our mentors is to guide the trainees to find the answers to their questions rather than just telling them the answers. We believe that exceptional mentoring is more concerned with teaching people how to think and make well-informed decisions rather than tell their trainees what to think. And this may sound counterintuitive, but we also encourage our mentors to allow their trainees to make errors, make mistakes, as long as they're non-critical mistakes in the process. And then they can discuss afterward what went wrong and then how to correct those issues. Next slide. All right. We understand that people learn skills in different ways. Some prefer learning from reading documents. Some are more visual learners and hands-on. What we've experienced through our process is that a balance of only about a third of the training should be conducted within the classroom. And the rest will be handled through on-the-job training with a qualified mentor. This is proven most effective with our plant laborer positions. Again, this is where your training agenda and curricula is being followed to ensure that you're covering all of the skills needed for the training, because over the course of the employee's learning, they're being prepared for the next step in our CSD process. Next slide. Validation. Validation is an audit of your employees' acquired skills for the role. It's not only includes the day-to-day operational requirements they need to perform, but also knowledge of plant safety, quality assurance, troubleshooting knowledge that they've developed since the first day on the job. It's a final check to make sure that the new employee is able to fly solo, perform the job on their own. Our process validation occurs within 30 days of completing the training curriculum, and at least they get revalidated annually thereafter. Next slide. Think of the validation step as a final exam. The trainee gets to demonstrate what they know through a process of verbal questions, demonstrational tasks, and behavioral observations on the floor. These validations are conducted on the shop floor with qualified skill auditors, also members of the CSD team. They're team members who are not only want to make sure that they keep a separation. They're team members who are not the employees' trainers or mentors. This helps maintain an independence between the roles and reduces the effect of bias that may be present. These skill validations used to be conducted with each employee using checklists on paper. We then tabulate the results and turn them back into the office. About 4 years ago, we actually adopted the Alchemy Coach application for tablet devices. And this has really eliminated a lot of the clerical work. Plus, our validators really prefer having the automation of using tablets to conduct their validations on the floor, rather than keeping stacks of stapled paper organized. On the back end, scheduling, scoring, and reporting is all taken care of through the Alchemy Manager program. Next slide. As I mentioned, Coach App tabulates the results of the validation. We have a scoring criteria for successful completion of those validations, both for non-critical and critical job skills. Examples of critical job skills may include like proper use of lockout tagout or demonstration of HACCP monitoring. Once the results are published, they're shared with the employee's team leader and they're reviewed with the employee, which leads us to our next final step. There we go, process review. Next slide, please. I mentioned the scorecard of the employee records that's shared between the employee and his team leader. We're also using other reporting tools available through Alchemy to measure how we're doing by job, production line, shift, even overall plant location on where we stand versus our team goals. These results are published for the teams to review each month. The process review step is also where we as a CSD team can analyze trends within our training process, follow and make necessary updates to our training content and practices. A change management process is followed to understand any new job requirements that are needed, or perhaps changes to the products or machinery in the area that will also require changes to the training for the job operators. We also use this review step to audit our team's performance to ensure that the CSD process is actually being followed by each team member in their designated functions. Next slide. In-process metrics from internal pillar health checks help us to understand the overall health of the pillar and its processes. Laura mentioned at the top of the session the impact on adherence to training instruction when the actual leadership gets involved and interacts with the employees in their work. One of the processes that we do use for internal auditing centers around what we refer to as leadership on the floor. At least twice a week, every member of the plant leadership team blocks off time from all their other activities to don their PPE and spend about 90 minutes on the production room floor, having conversations with our associates and observing their work practices. Tools such as Alchemy Coach are often used in many of these events. We're continuously seeking improvements to serve our internal customers better, to shorten the learning curve and get them up to speed more quickly. But we're also focused on existing employees and their work practices to conform to standards being defined in our training. Next step. This is just a screen capture of some of the kinds of questions and observations our team perform using Coach, either through handheld tablets or some of them use their own personal smartphones. The results of these observations are uploaded and the results are then shared and analyzed to get some insight into what improvement opportunities are present. Next step. And the results, they can be dramatic. We implemented CSD pillar structure at a bakery facility that we acquired a while back. They really didn't have a formal CSD training program. In just a period of 18 months, the plant achieved or exceeded their goals relating to food safety, plant safety, quality, and production. As an unexpected benefit, we saw a higher retention of those trained employees. These were employees that had gained confidence in their abilities and took pride in the achievements they were able to accomplish as a team. It made their work more meaningful, and thus they were more willing to stick around. I'm sure that a lot of us are experiencing frustration right now in finding and keeping quality candidates. Any decrease in turnover would be a welcome metric. Let's go to the next slide. So we'll be taking questions here shortly, but I just wanted to suggest some ideas to present to your teams if you're finding that your training processes at your company needs improvement or perhaps a complete overhaul. Getting your team members and work associates involved in the process is key to establishing an effective CSD process. But prior to that, complete buy-in and commitment from your organization's leadership is critical. In order to reap the rewards of a trained and knowledgeable workforce, commitment and investment in your people is essential. There's some great training tools in our industry they're designed to help us deliver that knowledge, but it takes the work of a dedicated team to create and sustain an effective training system to deliver those results that you need to achieve. So this has been an overview of the ConAgra process for employee training. I'm going to turn it over to Cassie Woods from BHJ, who will share her practices of leadership skills and development. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thanks, Chris. As Chris mentioned, my name is Cassie Woods. I'm a former corporate training coordinator with BHJ USA LLC, and so happy to have everyone here and hope all is having a good day. Next slide. Gotta make this real quick and brief. So as you all know, I'm sure through surveys and studies, and when I was recently onboarded on, I had learned through an intense survey, which was a survey on our culture, leadership, and sales, that we began to see these gaps within our teams: lack of communication, inability to delegate, uncertain of listening, accountability concerns, how to manage change, especially with technology and changing to that remote world, how to lead and inspire, and even some coaching techniques. On the right side, you can see I also implemented a new hire survey, which provided us some insight on any new hires that came in during their first 14 days and then their 90 days. So we kind of got to see different trends also between our regular employees and our temporary employees at the various 7 plants BHJ owns. So it was interesting to see these themes also pop up in this same survey. Next slide. And so with our partnership at Alchemy Intertech, we began to realize we can start strengthening our teams by reskilling some folks and upskilling our current individuals on our leads or supervisor roles. We knew we needed to be intentional in the way we were going to deliver these sessions. And as you can see, we began to level them out. And I wanted to ensure there was also some digestibility with these, because as we know, plants have a lot of different things going on their plates from day to day, whether it be shipping, logistical things, getting stuff out on a timely manner, and or just dealing with the regular things of teamwork, right? And so we wanted to make sure like I said, we're very intentional about the ways we were delivering this. So I decided to do monthly sessions. Next slide. But that meant ensuring that our employees and colleagues were not going to forget what they were learning. Due to my 7 years within higher education, from being an academic success coach, academic advisor, and even a career advisor, I had learned that this forgetting curve was very real. And so as you can see on there, the green line and the blue line kind of represent how our brains naturally just forget things. Over time, we may remember about 80% of what we just learned in this session today, but without coming back to this content and revisiting these slides, or maybe connecting with one of us great folks that presented today, you may just swipe right on your brain and forget it all. And what that means is we need to make sure that we're having more touch points with the content. And so that red line there proves that each time you kind of have a touch point or an intentional impact with that content, then you're more likely to bump up that remembering instead of forgetting. Next slide. And so knowing this knowledge, I knew that I wanted to take it a step further than just our e-learning platform. So Intertech Alchemy provided that for us, but then I took it a step further, and that meant having very intentional one-on-one discussions, which you can see on the left side here. Each group, which we had 3, management, operational, and supervisory, all took the e-learning modules the very first week of a month, just kind of absorbing the content. The next week, they took it a step further and began having these conversations with their supervisors, leads, or anybody else they were supervising about the content they were learning. So these one-on-ones were specific to the topics. So for example, if it was about building trust, then they were asking their supervisory or their supervisor questions on how they could establish that trust between one another and what that would look like to maybe reforge those bonds if it had been broken, and why. So we also aligned it with our values. You can see in one of the columns there, which is very important to having that purpose and that why within the reasons we do what we do within our companies. The third step we decided to take was having discussions in those same groups, because I knew firsthand, without having kind of your manager in the background or someone who, supervises you, the transparency could be challenging. And so again, having those intentional groups of management, operational, as well as supervisory and leads, had these times to just connect and collaborate and learn from one another about ways that they could practice and apply these everyday human soft skills that we're trying to invigorate our teams with. Next slide. All in all, we learned so much from just doing a whole level with our very first sets of groups. And within the surveys that I conducted, we learned that 45% more of our folks were collaborating during the discussions, and even taking it a step further to maybe email a colleague and run something by them, or come for me for a coaching time. 90% agreed that the courses were even easy to navigate and applicable to the workplace. And as we know, with technology, having it work for our employees is key to succeeding. 36% of our participants favored the active listening module the best. Even those who had already heard about that skill wanted to learn more because they knew how impactful that could be in the workplace. And overall, with the e-learning, the one-on-one discussions, and our further follow-up and follow-through discussions, we had a 4.2 out of 5-star rating for the entire program, which I feel is a pretty great success. And then lastly, next slide, we have lots of great qualitative data, which showed that they learned that they used not to yell on the production floor and maybe pull an employee to a quiet location to discuss any issues, which showed confidence in their skills. They noticed employee body language more and recognized those distractions that may occur on the production floor. Some even shared it has helped them to become more accountable to their actions, to support their team and show them that there's someone who understands and will work with them to the utmost extent. Some other comments were, it helped me to think about how to be a better leader and work on some of my own personal shortcomings. What a revelation. And then the last one here was, I know I need to work more on my listening skills and ensure that as I train others, I know they understand. And I can do that by listening to what they say when specific questions are being asked. I also thought that building trust was a very impactful topic as well. All in all, it was interesting to see how our teams were beginning to evolve and develop through these discussions, one-on-ones, and e-learning opportunities. Chris and I did a great job at giving you some really tactical tools for the workplace, and I believe now we are open for some questions for a short time.
All right. Thank you all so much, Laura, Chris, Cassie. Thank you so much for your wonderful presentations. I know that I got a lot of good information out of that. As a training professional, lots of good things to think about. But I hope you, our listeners, got some direction and ideas on how to bring training outside the classroom and support your food safety culture. Thank you all so much for your attention. Let's give our presenters a nice quiet round of applause and enthusiastics. Thank you to our sponsor, Safety Chain. Thank you, Sherelle and Chamonix in the background there. We don't have time for questions, but there is, starting right now, a post-session chat. So if you just click on that, I'm looking at my other screen. If you click on that in your Learn and Engage tab, you can go right to that, and I'll be there, and Laura will be there to answer some questions about training that you may have. And with that, thank you so much, and we'll see you on the post-session chat. Thank you again.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.